Hello, Bambaji here with a Sun Gate transit. And today we are looking at gate 43. You can see it in the diagram here. Gate 43 is in the Ajna Center. It is the gate of insight. It's also called breakthrough. It's in individual circuitry, and you can see that we have a channel between the ajna and the throat. That's why they are colored in green and brown. And the channel there is down the middle. It's the channel that is made up of the 43, which is our sun, and the 23, which is going to be the earth. So they are in polarity and harmonic with each other. Gate 23 there, grounding the sun as it appears in gate 43. So, 10th of November at 18:55 GMT. This is when the sun is transiting into gate 43. Welcome, welcome to this transit report. It's another long one, I think, because of the nature of it having the channel. It brings a slightly different energy in. So there's quite a lot to discover in this one today. In the traditional I Ching, it is called breakthrough. And when we look through the line descriptions, you'll find that very often breakthrough could be swapped out for the word insight, which is the human design name for this gate. It's the gate of insight. So it's in the ajna. It's pointing down towards gate 23 in the throat center. And this, as I said, is both the harmonic and the polarity. So the harmonic being the opposite in the wheel, no, the opposite in the channel, and the polarity being the opposite in the wheel. Gate 23 is called splitting apart, and it is the gate of assimilation. It is, of course, also in the same circuitry, and it follows all the way down, so it's all individuality. And together they form the channel of structuring, the design of individuality from genius to freak. This is a huge keynote for all of individuality, the genius to freak, because this is how those who are not individual see the individual, because they're different, because there's something about them that doesn't quite fit into the collective or the tribal. With the gate of insight, there can be a sudden awareness. There could be the possibility of a spontaneous individual knowing or not. Whether that knowing is going to be of value for anyone else, well, that's another story. The awareness possibility is spontaneous resolution. This is the voice of the muse. This is the inner ear. Because the 43 and the 23 are a harmonic polarity, if your personality or your design sun is in one, then you will automatically have the other one in your earth, and vice versa. So therefore, you will always have a definition in your chart. You will have the channel. That's what the definition is. And of course, it's also an activation you could have in your nodes. So there are lots of different ways of expressing the 4323. And when they show up in those particular places in your chart, they're always going to bring you a channel. It is, of course, possible to have the 43 activated through the moon or one of the other planets without gate 23 being part of that. But because we're following the sun on its journey around the wheel, I'm going to bring in elements of the channel because you're always going to find the channel. So the 43, it's part of individuality. We're going through a bit of an individual thing at the moment with the wheel. Now, I think we've had two individual, no, we had the one was individual, which was linked to the two in its earth. So individuality there, then the 4323 here. Then we have the 14 moving up as we go through, and the 14 is, hold on, the 1-8, the 14 is that way. Is just making sure I've got it right. The 14 goes to the 24, I believe. Does it? Is that right? Oh, God. Every now and then. The harmonic gate. No, see, it's not telling me there. I'm going to stop that bit. Okay, so we've got the 8 there, which is the one. The 23 there is, it's the 8, isn't it? The 14 goes to the 8, which is individuality. So again, keeping that theme going, then we have the 34, more individuality, and then the Earth to the 34 will be the 20. So yet again, and it's a really powerfully individual time over the next 4 transits. Yeah, so it's a mental process when we're up here in the 43. That's what we're exploring through this gate of insight. And insight is an interesting word to use because actually individuality is acoustic. It's not about sight, vision at all. The 43 is hearing. It's our inner ear. You know, there are 2 other gates when you look in the ajna that are pointing down towards the throat, and they are both collective gates. Gate 17 is the logical understanding, while gate 11 is the abstract sensing, and they are both visual. You know, they're about seeing. So the process of the 43 is quite different. If you have the 43rd gate in your design, you have a talkative mind. You have a mind that speaks to you and you can hear conversations going on in there. The headline above the lines in the I Ching say, in order for achievement to be maintained, the new order must be fairly established. And it's one of the underlying themes of the 43rd gate. Its insights are invariably about improving efficiency. This is their accomplishment. It's really about bringing that new order in, which is a mutation, because individuality is a very mutative circuit. And I want to just talk about this word mutation for a minute. I know sometimes we bring a prejudice to some of the words that are used in the descriptions of the mechanics in human design. And I've mentioned this word before as well. It's part of our conditioning sometimes to have these prejudices. You know, it is what it is, and it's fine, of course. And mutation is one of those words that can trigger people, but it is just a word at the same time. It is often used to describe a change in DNA. It is often considered to be a bad thing. And yet it was the mutation in the larynx 85 to 90,000 years ago that enabled humanity to reach its exalted position in the food chain, because we were able to develop language. And it was a mutation that occurred in 1781, which brought projectors into the world. My personality sun is in gate 61. My Godhead is the keepers of the wheel. I have all of the keeper gates. So the last 4 gates of this quarter are consciously activated in my design. So I'm rooted in this quarter of mutation. You know, I'm all for it. But I understand that it's difficult. And Bear doesn't like the word mutation. We've had this the whole time I've been studying human design. He has not liked this word mutation. And we had a discussion about it fairly recently. And we looked at some synonyms. And we found words like transmutation, evolution, modification, variation, change, and transformation. These are all synonyms, not saying that word, they're synonyms, which is one of my favorite spices, for mutation. So in all of these, then I would choose transformation. If I had to choose one, it would be a very good word to substitute for mutation. So if you do feel a need to do that because one of these words is really not sitting well with you, explore that. You know, it's a don't throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. Don't discard the message of individuality because you don't like one of these words that describes it. So transformation. And it's a good word because the quarter of mutation is purpose fulfilled through transformation. So I am going to continue using the word mutation because Ra gave us these keynotes for a reason. They're very powerful. You know, all of the original keynotes can have a cellular effect on our bodies, which is why we have such a long deconditioning process. You know, in a sense, all of the keynotes are mutative in and of themselves. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Back to gate 43. For mutation to be able to work and for mutation to be fairly established, it has to be beneficial in some way, whether or not from the outside we see that as either positive or negative, because actually that's not the point. The important thing is that the mutation must be of value to the other. And the important thing there is that the theme of structuring is supported by the value that it brings. Most people do not have the 43 alone. It is more usual to find it in the channel with the 23. And this tells us that this channel is quite significant, really. We need structure, we need efficiency, we need the movement of insight to its expression through the throat. It's not so much that the mutation is a kind of light bulb going off in the 43. It's more that the 43 efficiently tries to present the mutation, structuring the mutation so that it can have access to the collective. One of the greatest dilemmas for the individual in its relationship with the collective is its relationship to the collective, really. Individuality has a much easier relationship on the physical plane with the tribe because it's where they meet the tribe. But intellectual individuality has to find a way to deal with the collective. If you look at the mind, which is the head and the ajna together, then you can see that there are no tribal activations up there. The only circuitry is collective, both logic and abstract, and individuality in the middle. The individual is always confronted with having to bring structure to its mutation in order to be able to explain that to the collective, in order for the collective to be able to grasp it. The most difficult thing for the 43 is not the abundance of potential, the I know, which runs through their mind, you know. It is the enormous difficulty of translating that inner I know into something that can be recognized and accepted by the collective. You know, it's being able to structure the concept so that the collective has access to it. And if you can, you could be a genius. And if you can't, then you're the freak. And of course, this is the ultimate dilemma for the 43rd gate. It's not so much whether you have unique concepts or not, I know, I got it. It's more about whether you can actually translate that to the other. And this is the whole thing and the whole theme, really, for the 43. It's that process of efficiently structuring the information, and through that efficient structuring, the ability to be able to explain it to the other. No explanation, and there's only fear. There's fear of rejection, fear of being an outsider, fear of failing to fulfill your potential, to bring your I know to the other. As we've explored individuality over the last few months, there are certain themes that repeat, and they are keynotes often for the whole circuit. So things like deafness and stubbornness, though, would be two of those keynotes. The inner ear of gate 43 listens to its own inner voice. Now, this is the only possibility to transform the rationalized inner truth coming from the 6124 in the head into an insight, a unique perspective. This is the gate of individual mental knowing. It's not backed up by facts. And because of that, it could be merely delusional. And it takes some fortitude, you know, some strength, courage even, to stand behind your inner knowing. So gate 43 is deaf. The 4323 is the deafest channel in what is a very deaf circuit. It doesn't want to be influenced in any way, and it doesn't want to be interfered with. Individuals with this gate, they truly don't want to listen. And it's very, very hard for them to learn anything from anyone else. They are some of the hardest people to teach. And it's not a fault, you know, it's not a problem. It's their genetic protection from undue influence. To teach a 43, you have to keep things very simple, and you have to begin at the beginning. There can be a lot of suffering in individuality through a lack of being able to explain themselves. And it's rooted in how the individual begins its process. I've often mentioned how important it is for us to enter into our relationships correctly. It's the most important thing, really, because of the way that we are designed to experience ourselves, which is nearly always through the other. So making sure that they are the correct other according to our nature and according to our design is key. So the 43rd gate is caught in a dilemma. And the dilemma is that it has a unique knowing, and it has to find some way to be able to explain that knowing in order to be accepted by society, by the collective. And it cannot do that unless it's living out its own nature, because it won't have the right timing. And here is where we find the root of the suffering in this circuit. So many individuals are deeply scarred, really, by trying to express their knowing at the wrong time to the wrong people. Not only do we have to enter into things really properly in terms of definition, design, and type, but if you're an individual, and particularly if you're a 43 or a 4323, you can't really do anything unless you start at the very beginning. There's nothing more frustrating in this world than a 4323 who knows everything and yet knows nothing. This is a very quick, grasping mind. It can grasp the surface knowing of just about anything that comes its way, but that doesn't mean that it really knows anything about it. And of course, it doesn't want to listen to what anybody else has to say about it. Not ever. Don't bring that one on. 43s have to learn that an insight can only be based on what can be grasped at a fundamental, basic level. Imagine the individual school child, for example, they have to start at the very beginning of learning mathematics. They can never miss 1 + 1 = 2. No, they mustn't miss that phase. If they get the basic foundation, then at some point in their own process, they will leave the collective. And they will then have a solid base for their own unique mathematics. And they will be able to explain themselves because they have a foundation of knowing underneath. Ra had the 4323, and he said he knew so many things on the surface. The knowing is almost endless. But it's on the surface. And he didn't really understand what it was to be a knower until he spent 12 years knowing the same thing and knowing it from the very beginning, because he was the beginning of human design. And in knowing the very beginning and the very basis, well, this was the perfect education for a freak, because he got all of the formula right at the beginning. And so everything else from that point on was relatively easy. The secret for the individual, and particularly the individual mind, is that not only are you entering into a relationship properly as yourself, but you have to see that you can't enter in the middle and expect that you're really going to know. You have to start at the beginning. And only if you can do that will there be something for you in your life. There will be a foundation for real knowing that you can then explain. The only real achievement, and achievement is what was mentioned in the top of the lines of the I Ching, in order for achievement to be maintained. The only real achievement for the 43rd gate is the ability to explain their knowing. Unless they can properly explain their knowing, they're not going to feel like they've achieved anything. There can be a real frustration in that. And it resonates back to the process in the 28th gate, which is the same circuitry after all. It's that thing of like, is life really worthwhile? So for the 43, if there's no way of explaining themselves and getting that out there, then is their life really worthwhile? Remember, genetic continuity flows through all of this. You could go to a resonance to the 57th hexagram, individuality again. And am I afraid of tomorrow? The individual knower is afraid of tomorrow if they know that tomorrow they're going to have to explain themselves and they don't know if they can, because the individual is always attracting attention. Then they will also attract rejection. If they cannot explain themselves, then the freak will be rejected. All of the awareness centers carry fear of one sort or another. We've just been through the primal fears of the splenic season, and the solar plexus, that tends to express fear as nervousness. When we get to the ajna, the fear expresses as anxiety because it's mental. The 43 can have a deep anxiety that no one will know what they mean, that they're not able to explain themselves. So communication skills are really important for all individuals so that they can develop those skills necessary to explain themselves. It's a very good practice if you have a child with the 43-23 to encourage them to explain themselves, to encourage them to grasp the basics of whatever it is they're interested in, and to do that from an early age so that it becomes natural for them. All of individuality has the potential for melancholy. It's another keynote for the whole circuit. The specific melancholy in gate 43 is triggered by inefficiency. Whilst in the 23, the melancholy is felt as frustration over not being able to explain oneself clearly, because that's the throat end of the channel. We looked at awareness streams when we were exploring the splenic gates. The ajna is an awareness center, so we have streams running through it here too. The fuel and the potential are always on the head side or the pressure side, where the fuel, so it's either going to be the head or the root. Up here in the ajna, we've got the head. And then possibility and expression are the channels that are in the between the ajna and the throat. So the 43-23, they represent the possibility and expression of the stream of knowing, expressing unique and individual insights to the collective. This is a throat gate, the 23. Clear communication and understanding are required, or there is the risk of that rejection. The grounding, it comes in many ways. The fact that these gates create a channel, that's part of it, because there's an understanding in the circuitry. So they understand the energy that each other shares. They share all of those keynotes together. We'll explore the connection more, I think, as we work through the lines, rather than doing too much more on it now. But we are going to experience the channel, all of us, over the next 6 days. So let's take a quick look at that. The channel of structuring, it's a projected channel. Therefore, it requires recognition and invitation in order to operate correctly. An invitation to share unique insights could mean that the insights will actually be accepted rather than either ignored or rejected. And you become recognized as a genius rather than rejected as a freak. Timing is something that we hear a lot about through many elements of human design and the mechanic that we have. It's a particular theme for individuality because of the nature of individuality, which can be perceived as being slightly strange, slightly different. The right timing, therefore, is crucial in order to be able to explain that inner knowing and explain it clearly. This is what leads to recognition and to the potential for empowering others. The 43-23 has the potential to totally change the way we think about things. There's a real capacity for innovative thinking, and it's based on improving the efficiency of how energy is used. Generally, this isn't about gradual change. We're not talking about small improvements here and there, modifications of existing functionality. No, this is thinking that can bring a quantum mutative leap. The other side of this is that the 43-23 can be a bit of a blurter, not waiting for an invitation before speaking. And there's quite a lot of pressure there to get it out. I know. And consequently, they go through life unheard. Timing again. This channel really operates at its best and its most efficient and effective and empowering when it waits to be invited to speak. People who have this channel, they often need to talk things through with others. They need to hear themselves what they're saying. And it can often be a surprise to them as much as it is to anyone else, especially if the channel's unconscious. You can imagine that this could be a great gift or not. Bear and I have a friend with this channel. I think I've mentioned him a couple of times. He has gate 43 defined 6 times and gate 23 defined twice. So this is so much pressure. It's his only channel. It's all he's got in his design. So he's a mental projector. And if talking was an Olympic sport, he'd win it every time. He'd be gold across the board. He also has the 47 4 times, so there's a lot going on in that ajna. He only has 14 gates defined out of a total of 26 because there are many multiple activations there. He's got the leadership, I think, gate 31, he's got that 3 times. He's also got conflict, revolution, and crisis. Oh, and he's got 34 in the first line, which is called the bully. So all of these sorts of activations, when you look at a chart, you're having an awareness of the mechanic. It can make such a huge difference to the life experience. And part of the mechanic in terms of individuality is the awareness of correct timing. Talking of which, I think I've probably talked about long enough on this one. I shall head off into the land of lines, and I shall be back with the 43 in the first line shortly. And thank you very much for joining me for another gate exploration. Yeah, I look forward to doing this one with you. I look forward to all of them. I love doing this so much. And yeah, until, well, half an hour. See you in half an hour when I do line 1. And until then, don't get into any trouble. Don't get into any mischief in the half hour it's going to take me to sort out line 1. I'll see you soon. Go gently.